Dr. Anthony Fauci is throwing cold water on the news of a vaccine from Russia.
Having a vaccine, Deborah, and proving that a vaccine is safe and effective are two different things. I hope that the Russians have actually definitively proven that the vaccine is safe and effective. I seriously doubt that they've done that.
Well, we just spoke last hour to a Russian bankrolling the vaccine effort that Putin says has been approved.
We'll start massive vaccination of Russians in October. This vaccine will be available to other countries around November, and we know the technology works, and we will publish the data in August and September to demonstrate that. So the gradual rollout in August and September will give, of course, some additional data, but our Minister of Health, our bureaucrats, would not have approved it unless they were absolutely confident the technology works.
There's, of course, a lot of skepticism about that. Proof of its effectiveness has not been presented. I want to bring in Dr. Sanjay Gupta. Sanjay, you were part of that conversation. The more we talked to them, it seemed clear they haven't had phase 3 trials. They're, in fact, just going to, they say they've done phase 1 and phase 2, and they're just going to start injecting people with this, right?
So you're right.
Overseas tonight, news from Russia. Vladimir Putin says they have a vaccine for COVID, that his daughter has been given the vaccine. Of course, the immediate questions among them, how safe is this vaccine? Here's our senior foreign correspondent, Ian Pennell, tonight.
Tonight, Russia claiming a major victory with the world's first approved coronavirus vaccine. President Vladimir Putin even saying one of his daughters has been given the inoculation they're nicknaming Sputnik vaccine.
Its efficiency has been tested. 100% of the people developed immunity.
But many scientists in Russia and around the world say it simply hasn't been properly tested. Russia choosing to go ahead before completing that crucial final phase 3 trial that's used to show if a vaccine will work safely in a large population. They only lined up 2,000 people for that final step. Compare that to the tens of thousands now being tested with vaccines being developed by Moderna, Pfizer and Oxford. Dr. Fauci shared his reaction with National Geographic.
I hope that the Russians have actually definitively proven that the vaccine is safe and effective. I seriously doubt that they've done that.
Consumers clamoring for swine flu vaccine have given pharmaceutical powerhouses one more reason to jump into the once anemic vaccine business. Until recently, drug makers had devoted much of their resources toward lucrative daily pills for chronic diseases. By the middle of this decade, only a handful were still making vaccines.
Swine flu was, literally the wake-up call saying, hey, listen, you've got a global pandemic, Category 6. Now, Category 6 doesn't mean that it's, Stephen King time, but what it does mean is that this virus is all over the world, and that you're looking at exposure in the United States, which will pretty much probably hit the majority of the U.S. population by the time it's all said and done, of those certainly that aren't vaccinated.
That means millions of doses of vaccines, from swine flu to seasonal flu, have been manufactured, and that translates into huge sales for companies like GlaxoSmithKline, Novartis, and others.
The interests of big pharmaceutical companies seem to be at odds with the interests of the majority of global population.
We need to disconnect the research and development and the possible, I would say, financial gain that you can get from it. And so if we're to disconnect that, then you might have a much better drive for research and development for where you have, I would say, astronomical figures and numbers of people in need for it. Like malaria, We know it's 500,000 deaths on a yearly basis. So we need a vaccine.
Our fight against an invisible enemy has turned life in America upside down.
At the end of the day, we're trying to protect our health systems from getting completely overrun.
So don't know if you saw it, Trump's HHS Secretary Alex Azar in front of Congress being asked point blank, will a vaccine to the coronavirus be affordable for the American people?
Well, but we can't control that price because we need the private sector to invest.
Oh my God, when I heard that, I don't think everyone realized the gravity and significance of that moment. Here you have the head of HHS, but a former drug company executive fighting like heck to keep this system of putting profits over people in place, which is ridiculous in a time like this. I don't think people understand how this system really works and operates.
Here's the secret I'm going to let you in on that everyone in Washington already knows. The pharmaceutical industry can only create new drugs because the government pays for the initial research with our tax dollars. This is how they turn public money into private profits. The drug industry spends way more on marketing old drugs than developing new ones. And they spend obscene amounts of money to buy up smaller companies and then pay big salaries for their executives instead of funding their own research. Then they jack up drug prices on the rest of us. The result is that Americans pay nearly 4 times as much for prescription drugs than people in other countries. In some cases, 67 times more for the same prescription drug.
Even before coronavirus, we've had this massive crisis in drug pricing for all these Americans that can't afford these pharmaceuticals that they need to live. And when you hear their voices, you can just hear the frustration and despair that they'd be treated like this in the richest country on earth.
Begging for your life from for-profit companies is not a way to live.
But drug companies are allowed to file patents on these drugs and then price gouge Americans out of being able to afford them.
With coronavirus, this is what you should be worried about.
So there is something that we can do about all of this right now. The Trump administration already has tools to bring drug prices down. It just isn't using them because it's cozying up to the drug industry. There's an existing law. It's called government patent use. It allows the federal government to buy drugs on the competitive market, essentially override or break the patent. If the company can't make enough or refuses to sell at a reasonable price, they have the option to do that. Donald Trump could order agencies to break monopolies around drugs at any time and stop price gouging. It would save people's lives.
Tell Donald Trump to end the monopolies on life-saving drugs. Let's start with coronavirus vaccine and treatments.
И она работает более точно, формирует стойкий антительный и клеточный иммунитет. Я это тоже хорошо очень знаю, поскольку одна из моих дочерей сделала себе такую прививку. Я думаю, что в этом смысле она поучаствовала в эксперименте. После первого укола, после первой прививки температура была у нее 38, на следующий день 37 с небольшим, и все. После второго укола, второй прививки тоже температура немного поднялась, и все, сошла потом на нет. Чувствует себя хорошо, и титры высокие.
Really, I can just say that we are in a close contact with the Russian health authorities, and discussions are ongoing with respect to possible WHO pre-qualification. of the vaccine. But again, pre-qualification of any vaccine includes the rigorous review and assessment of all required safety and efficacy data.
And as we said, Russia announces a new COVID vaccine, and the world has responded with apprehension. Russian President Vladimir Putin says one of his adult daughters has been administered this vax and says he expects the drug to be widely available by this October. Joining us to expand on all of that, former UK MP George Galloway. George, first, let's start with the incredible news this morning of Russian scientists clearing the first coronavirus vaccine for distribution. Russia's health ministry says this will provide immunity for up to 2 years. Why then are the WHO and Western leaders calling this a rush to market? Doesn't the pandemic warrant a rush to market?
You could be sure if it was a British or American product, it would be rushed to market, with the emphasis on the word market. So this has burst on the scene, Sputnik 5, just with the same intensity and brilliance and illumination of the surrounding landscape as the original Sputnik did long before you were born, Manila. Nobody could believe that the then Soviet Union had put a spaceship, a satellite into orbit when everyone thought that the Western side was miles ahead on the search for that technology. This is the same. And I can assure you, although I wasn't reading all the papers at the time, I was only 5 or 4, the impact is exactly the same. Much gnashing of teeth and wailing and rending of garments, jealousy, churlishness, and of course, in this case, absolute silence. If you didn't have RT, you wouldn't know that this vaccine had just gone into orbit here in Britain, at least. So it's green cheese, to continue the moon-like metaphor. It is green cheese, it's jealousy. But I'll tell you what, if they'll fly one here to the embassy tonight, I'll take it tomorrow and tell you how it goes.
Wow, George. Now, if memory serves, it was just about a month ago or so that American media alleged Russia was attempting to steal vaccine information and data. But now here the Russians are producing something that could potentially save millions of lives. Why continue this anti-Russia rhetoric? Why not take this opportunity to come together as we do in space, George, and work together for the greater good?
Why not, indeed? And as you say, that's what we do in space. No one is asking whose space station it is. No one's charged for accommodation on the space station. It's crazy. This provided an opportunity for the whole world to come together and combat a pandemic that was equally deadly wherever it landed, anywhere in the world. And it may not be too late for that. Let's hope that common sense prevails and that we can all get behind this vaccine. We can distribute it to people on an affordable basis, i.e. not thousands of dollars for a shot like it would have been if it would have been an American or a British one that got to market first.
Oh, absolutely, George. That's why I was glad that you underscored the term rush to market, underscore the market part, because, you know, if it was any Western pharmaceutical company, they would be charging, you know, an arm and a leg to get this vaccine. Now, let's hope that, that they do come together like we do in space, all nations that work on the International Space Station. We can work peacefully up there. I'm not sure why we can't do that down here.